Fathers by Roland H. Bainton. Chapter 6. As Rome Fell. The church in the West, in the meantime, was being sorely tried because of the barbarians pushing into the empire. To catch up with the story there, we must go back to a time before the fall of Rome. When the Romans were trying to protect the frontiers, Rome itself was so far away from the boundary that the government was moved up to Milan in Upper Italy. The officer in charge of the region was Ambrose. He had been the Bishop of Milan. He had been brought up in a Christian family, but had never been baptized. The Bishop of Milan died, and a new one had to be chosen. There was great excitement because the Arian quarrel had not yet died out, and both the Nicene and Arian parties wanted to put in their man. Ambrose feared a riot and came to the church to keep the peace. As he walked in, a child cried out, "Ambrose for bishop." And all the people cried, "Ambrose for bishop." Nothing that he could say would stop them. He had not even been baptized, but they took care of that. He was run through the baptism and all the lower grades of the clergy, and finally made a bishop in a week's time. So the Catholic Church definitely had some of those issues that we have with New Age cults, that, the person's favored by the leader, and then the leader dies, and instead of picking somebody more qualified, they, pick somebody favored. Well, it's not as simple as that, but yeah. He had never been a monk like St. Jerome and St. Chrysostom, but he admired the monks, and after he became a bishop, spent much time with them. He had all the courage of a Chrysostom in standing against rulers who interfered with the church or did wrong, and he was promoted. And he was more successful, perhaps because he had been trained as a government official rather than as a monk. His first great quarrel was with the Empress Justina, who supported the Arians and demanded for them one basilica in the city of Milan. Ambrose, who stood for the Nicene faith, refused to give them any at all. His reason was not simply that he considered the Arian belief wrong, but that Arianism had come to be the religion of the Goths, who had been converted by missionaries from the Roman Empire at the time when the Arians were on top. It obviously made more sense to them to be Arian. In the years following, most of the empire accepted the Nicene faith when the Arian view spread from among those considered to be barbarians, with the result that Arian had come to mean barbarian and Nicene Roman. The empress was hiring so-called barbarian soldiers to defend the empire against other barbarians. Here's a picture of one of them as shown in their own crude drawing for the soldiers of the Arian faith. She desired a church in Milan. Actually, that's not too bad of a guy wearing a mask riding a horse, but Ambrose refused, and with his followers filled up the church that she desired. The empress sent so-called barbarian troops to surround the church. Ambrose, while waiting to see what the soldiers would do, taught his people to sing some of the hymns that he had written. He is called the father of hymn singing in the Latin language. Okay, well, what's that title rather than the translation? We want to hear that one too. The empress had not the heart to command an attack on a congregation of singers. Ambrose won. A more important conflict happened with the Emperor Theodosius. He was a great general and very successful in keeping back those considered to be barbarians. There was no trouble with him over Arianism, but there was something else. He had a hot temper. At Salonica today, there was a famous chariot driver. He was guilty of a crime for which he had been arrested by an officer of the emperor. The games came. The people wanted the driver and killed the officer. Very well, said the emperor. Theodosius, they shall have their games. Yeah, people need to punish athletes as if they were real people now, too. Into the great amphitheater thronged 7,000 people. The soldiers went in too. The entrances were closed, and the 7,000 were all killed. Oh, okay, well, killing your sports fans, that's not cool. Shortly afterwards, the emperor came to Milan, and to the church of St. Ambrose for communion. The bishop met him at the door. You cannot enter here with hands soiled by human blood. Well, that was definitely not the position of the church later. The emperor had to promise never to carry out a sentence of death until 40 days after the offense, lest anything be done in anger, and he had to do penance before being admitted to communion. Penance for killing 7,000 people that probably didn't need to even be heard. Chrysostom in the east had not been able to defy the empress. Ambrose succeeded in the west. With empress and emperor alike, this was a sign of the way things were to work out in the east and the west. In the east, the emperor was to rule the church. In the west, popes were to command kings. That day, however, was a long way off. The Roman Empire itself had first to pass away in the west, at a time when the old man, whose thinking did much to shape the world that he did not live to see, he is called St. Augustine of Hippo, a little town in North Africa. We know more about him than about most of the men of his time because he wrote a story of his own life, and he told what had gone on inside him as no one before had ever told. And we even see with the scriptures that how, Muhammad is mentioned 4 times in the Quran. His name is mentioned 4 times, 5 if you include his title. So if you claim that Muhammad wrote the Quran or composed the Quran, you'd have to say that Augustine was far more self-centered in just a little bit of writing. At the very least. As a lad, he relates he belonged to a gang of boys who played until late one night and then made a raid on a neighbor's pear tree, which was laden with fruit, but tempting neither in color nor in taste because the pears were not ripe. Well, deer and stuff will certainly eat unripe fruit right off the tree. We took huge loads, says Augustine, but we did not eat them, just nibbled and threw them to the pigs. It was mean, but I loved it. Why did we do it? A murderer does not kill just for killing. He wants to get even or to take something from the man he kills. But we robbed the tree for nothing at all. I am sure of this, that I should never have done it if I had been alone. The gang spirit carried us along. When someone said, let's go, let's do it, each was ashamed to come out and say that he would be ashamed to do it. We chuckled to think of the prank we were playing on the owner, sound asleep, little suspecting that his tree was being stripped. It was mean. I hate now to think about it. Augustine's father, well, he certainly could have got the guy killed by cutting back his food supply. Theft can kill people. Augustine's father was considered to be a pagan until late in life. His mother, Monica, was a Christian and worried greatly over her son. She hoped he would become a Christian and talked with the bishop about him, who said, "Don't worry, the son of so many tears cannot be lost." Now, I personally advocate the encouragement of every single good belief, every single good action, and being lost or not being lost is sort of a package. When Augustine grew older, he became a father without marriage and had to have money to take care of his boy and the mother. For this reason, he became a schoolteacher in Carthage, a city not far from his home. But the boys were unruly, as he had been himself. He heard that teaching was easier at Rome, and without telling his mother, slipped off, taking his boy and the boy's mother. Teaching in Rome was easier. The boys were well behaved, but skipped off just before payday. Augustine was glad when a better place opened in Milan. His mother learned that he was there and joined him. Milan was the city of St. Ambrose. Augustine went to hear him preach. As a teacher, he was interested to see how the preacher used his hands and his voice and made up his sentences. Augustine soon found something more than graceful hands and smooth words. Here was a man who knew about the power of God. Here was a brave man, a decisive man. Augustine wished he could be like that. Whenever he had been in a tight place, he had always run away. And if he could be like Ambrose. But Augustine was not ready to change yet. Since he was not married to the mother of his boy, his own mother wishing him to send her back to Africa and marry another woman. To please his mother, he did send her back, and then took someone else, also without marriage. So, two dishonorable things, right? At this point in his life, he heard the story of the monks in Egypt who lived away from women altogether. He was astonished that these simple men could make themselves live such hard lives. With what purpose, really? And there was Ambrose, who acted like a monk, even though a bishop. Augustine went off by himself into a garden and beat his breast and tore his hair. Strange, he thought, that when I tell my hand to beat my breast and tear my hair, it obeys. When I tell my mind to do something, it refuses. Then Augustine heard the voice of a child playing in a house nearby. The child was repeating, "Take up and read, take up and read." He went over to a seat and found there a copy of what they considered to be the New Testament. As he took it up, the pages opened at the words in Paul's letter to the Romans, "Not in rioting and drunkenness, but put on the Lord Jesus and do not follow the desires of the flesh." Now, if Jesus was a spiritual master, a Curie, but again, there's a lot of differences between Paul and Jesus. I did one video on that, although I have addressed it elsewhere. That Jesus didn't want Christianity, but Paul definitely. But having some belief is going to improve his life, isn't it? Or, well, in some way. Augustine surrendered. "I bowed my neck to the yoke that is easy, and my shoulders to the burden that is light." In all of this, he felt that a power beyond himself had been leading him, though a man may do better or worse, and the way his life comes out depends on God and His grace. The word grace means a free gift, God's forgiveness, God's love, and God's power are not ours to command, but His to give, and when and where, and to whom He will. Augustine knew that God uses human tools, and that God's tool for him had been his mother. He went in from the garden and told her that the Lord Jesus had to become his strength and his Redeemer. A little later, Augustine with his son was baptized by Ambrose of Milan. Then the party started back for Africa. Yeah, how can you be a leader in the church and not even be a full-on Christian yet? Anyways. Oh, wait, I was thinking of Ambrose that was made to be a leader. Oh, wait, no. Okay, yeah. Confused for a second. Then the party started back for Africa. Monica fell sick on the way and died. Augustine was at first too overcome even to cry. He sang the hymns of Ambrose, and his tears were unstopped. With his son, he returned to Africa, and then the boy died. Alone now, Augustine became a monk and wanted to spend his days in peace, but he was called to be the Bishop of Hippo. The picture that I showed previously shows him with the bishop's hat on the table. As a matter of fact, he did not have a hat like that. The picture was done later and shows the kind of hat used in the Middle Ages. The rod, like a shepherd's crook, is called a crozier. A crozier? It is the sign of the bishop. This, too, was not used until later. A hard time it was to be a bishop. The so-called barbarians were sweeping over Europe. Why did God let them? Some thought he was angry with the Arians. That was Ambrose's explanation. But when did the Nicene party suffer too? St. Augustine sought a deeper answer. The fight that is going on now, he said, is only part of a fight that has always been going on, not only on earth but in heaven, between the forces of good and evil. Well, perhaps the sky, but the paradise hereafter, no, I disagree with that. These forces break out on earth, and a Cain kills an Abel. The Roman Empire, for the most part, is like Cain and has grown up by taking land from other peoples. It is a result of the greed of men. The barbarians are only paying Rome back for what she has done to others. The Roman Empire will pass. Something else will come. It is already beginning now. The Christian Church, although it is not perfect, is an expression of the forces making for good. We need not be troubled too much if Rome passes away, provided the Church remains. Augustine did not mean that the Church should take the place of the Roman Empire. He wanted to have a government as well as a church, but the government should be guided by the Church. The popes later tried to fulfill his dream, yet nothing on earth lasts except love. Well, it depends on what type of love, right? Saint Augustine has an interesting comparison of love and mercy, of love and money. Money, he said, is made smaller if you give it away, but love grows. Well, it can. It can also shrink, depending on what type of love it is, right? We show more kindness to a man when we give him money if we do not ask it back. But we do not give love unless we require it to be repaid. When money is received, it stays with him who receives it, and leaves him who gives it. But love does not leave the man who gives it, and if it is not repaid, still stays with him. And he who receives it does not possess it unless he gives it back. St. Augustine is great in his preaching. He is greater in his prayers. Late have I loved thee. His fairness is so old and yet so new. Late have I loved thee, and behold, thou wert within, and I without, and there I sought thee. Unlovely, I broke upon the lovingness which thou hadst fashioned. Thou wert with me, and I was not with thee. Long was I held from thee by those things which without thee are not. Thou didst call and cry, and burst my deafness. Thou didst gleam and glow, and dispel my blindness. Thou didst exhale fragrance. I drew breath, and I pant after thee. I have tasted, and do hunger and thirst. Thou hast touched me, and I burn for thy peace. Thou hast made us for thyself, and our hearts are restless till they find their rest in thee. And perhaps I should share another verse that can be used against the self-abusive power of the monks. Okay, I was thinking, where's the... Okay, there's a verse. There's a verse, and I can't remember where it was. Okay, yeah, I thought I thought it was in chapter 4, but it's not. Something about not leading things to your own death, but, you know, because the self-abuse can certainly do that, even if you don't get an affection that wears you down over time. But I don't quite have that. I mean, I don't quite know the reference here. Okay, and yeah, I thought it was maybe near one of the verses of intoxicants too, but I don't see it.